So I am Stacy. I am Cassie's sister, and I'm very honored to be here. And I really appreciate you guys having me and the invitation to come and speak to you. So before I talk about myself, let me start off by asking how many of you, by show of hands, have social media? Mostly everybody, right? How many of you use it to unwind from a crazy day right before you go to sleep and you're just kind of, no? Yeah, well, I do. A senseless day. So have you ever found yourself scrolling and then you go down this rabbit hole when you're on Facebook or Instagram, right? And you don't snap out of it, so you get that low battery warning, oh, I've been on that long, right? So that's how I happen along on this world of memes. If you don't know what a meme is, that guy right there is considered a meme. It's where you take an ordinary picture and you add a caption to it, and voila, it comes to life, whether it's through humor, inspiration, and I find them hilarious. Like that one, it cracks me up, right? But it also motivates me. And I'd start saving them and sending them to my friends and family. And I literally started a Pinterest board when I was saving them because it was taking up my phone space. So a couple of months ago, I go through there. I have over 1,000 saved of memes. So I started us on this adventure back in February of speaking publicly for motivational purposes. And I thought, what better way than to dig into my huge pile of memes? And I'm talking, it's huge. And so that's how I came up with this. It's called Meme What You Say. And let's just start off, okay? I'm going to start off about me. It's like trying to pat your head and all at the same time, right? So let's talk about me and who do I think I am? And for you to understand that is probably understand who I am, right? So you probably heard I'm going to talk about vulnerability and failure, and you're probably thinking, who is this person that's coming in to tell us about this? I'm not claiming to be an expert. I will never claim it, but I do think I've got a lot to talk about on that. And let's start off with the fact that I am the firstborn child. My mom's here. You got to meet Mama Bear. I am young, pretty fairly young, but growing up as the firstborn, if you are the firstborn or if you have a sibling, you know what that personality is like, right? I don't have to explain it. That's who I am. But I'm also, with that, I'm very eager, I'm very driven, I'm very passionate, and I definitely get that from my parents. So I'm really not experienced that. Oh, before I do, since you guys know Cassie, I couldn't pass up the opportunity. Put up a picture, that cute little face right there. So I am pretty young. I'd say I'm still very young. I think my body thinks one thing, but my mind is definitely still very young. And I've never been married, never had kids. I really haven't even failed at much, which does not make me, that doesn't help my purpose here. I failed at relationships, quite a few. But I growing up, I was very driven, like I said, and I was successful. I'd like to consider myself successful. Got a big kid job, worked my way up, and I always had a plan. I planned my life. I said by this age, I want to be making this amount of money and been working my way up, and then I want to get married, and then I want to have kids, thinking that this is how life goes. And I started doing that, and then in 2014, God gave me this detour. 2014, I found a lump in my breast. I was 31, and we didn't have much history of breast cancer in my family at the time. But I did have this nagging feeling that something wasn't right. So naturally, I go to the doctor, and she recommends some scans, and initially the scans didn't show much. Seeing as how I was still young, I had very dense breasts. The radiologist just told me that he thought it was a cyst, and that I should come back in 6 months. And so I went home, and I just, that intuition, that gut feeling that you have. So I called my mom, and I told her about it, and she really urged me and validated me and said, you really need to go get a second opinion. So I did, and I thank God that I did, because it turns out I had stage 3 breast cancer at the age of 31. And it had already traveled to my lymph nodes. And so at that moment, which it was the beginning of October, which y'all know is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, so you're going through this flood of emotions, and all of a sudden there's pink everywhere, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's so overwhelming. But what happened over the next 2 years became a blur. And I remember that first doctor visit, after I had gotten the call, the doctor told me over the phone, he's like, I think you're a straight shooter, you just want to hear it, don't you? I was like, yeah. So he told me, he's like, you do have it, I don't know how far it is, just come in tomorrow and we're gonna get started. So that day I went home to my parents, I called my mom, I was like, Mom, can I come home for dinner? Which probably was the first sign that she knew something was wrong, because I never come home for dinner. I went home for dinner that night, and I told both my parents, which is, I waited till we finished eating, and then I was like, okay, this is what's happening. And so instantly, it was, doctor's appointments and tests and do this and do that. But I do remember that first doctor appointment that they went with me the next day, and my doctor, who I absolutely adore, he just kind of told me, he said, you're about to endure a marathon, not a sprint. And I'm thinking, great, I'm horrible at running. Like, if you see me running, you should run too, because something's chasing me. Like, that's how much I'm not a runner. But over those 2 years, I went through chemo, I went through radiation, multiple surgeries, a double mastectomy, reconstruction surgery. It was a lot, right, over 2 years. And I had the support of my family, I had a loving partner, and friends, and I think we've all had our unfortunate run with a disease, whether it be cancer or any of the multiples that are out there, and whether it be you or a loved one. But when they say that it changes you, they don't just mean physically. It's mentally, it's emotionally, it's spiritually, it changes everything. And so for me, going through all of that, and even having the biggest support group and having role models to look up to like Jen, and seeing her blog and following her and reading all of the other stories, it doesn't change the fact that when you're going through it, it does something to you. No matter what age, no matter what stage of life you're in, it does something, and it does something differently for everybody. What it did for me was I instantly went into warrior mode. I was like, I got this, guys. Your mind over matter kind of thing. And so I went into this warrior mode where I didn't want to let my family or my friends see me weak. I was so stubborn. My parents raised me to be a strong and independent woman, and now I'm being stubborn because people want to help me and they want to do things for me, and I'm like, no, I got this, I never knew how upset I would be at being told I can't mow my own yard. It's like, what do you mean I can't mow? The restrictions that were put on me as a person physically, but my mind was telling me, no, I can do that. So we had a few battles, a few times where they caught me mowing the yard after they told me not to, and I was like, I'm doing it anyway. I don't care. But I wore the shield and I didn't let anyone in. I put that armor on of being tough, and quite honestly, if I wasn't bald, you probably wouldn't have even known I was sick. And when I say it was a blur, and it was an out-of-body experience, because even now when I look back and look at pictures, I was like, that wasn't me. Like, I didn't go through that. I didn't do that. Like, it feels like I watched somebody else do that. And some of the memories that I don't have or that I do have, it doesn't feel like it happened to me, and I couldn't understand why. I didn't understand why I wasn't processing it, why I wasn't accepting it, because I didn't. It took me a long time to even say I have cancer or I had cancer. It was like I avoided actually physically saying the words. And come to find out, I was done with all of my treatments and surgeries in 2016, And I was going for my checkups, and I was telling my doctor about this anxiety that I had. I was like, I'm so anxious. Is it going to come back? Because you get done one day and the doctor says, okay, see you in 6 months. And you're like, wait, my last 2 years have been overrun with appointments and surgeries and always looking to the next milestone. And now you're telling me, adios, like I just see you in 6 months? It didn't make sense. So the 6-month checkup, I told her, I was like, I have this anxiety. Like, what if it comes back? What am I doing? What am I not doing? Like, everything was just, it was overwhelming. It was overtaking my day. And she referred me to a therapist. So I was like, okay, I'd never been to therapy, but I wasn't against it. So I went to therapy, and let me tell you, whew. My poor therapist. I don't have the same therapist. I had transitioned to another one because I'm pretty sure the first one was like, oh my goodness. But I started going to therapy, and the more I said things out loud, it wasn't that, my therapist was great. It wasn't that she gave me such insight or that she opened my eyes. I opened my eyes just by saying the things that I said to her. Hearing myself say them, all of a sudden I was like, oh, it starts clicking, right? And come to find out, like, I had PTSD, which is very common in cancer patients, survivors, thrivers. Everybody is very common, and you don't think about it. That's not one of the things that you read about in the books to be prepared for. So I started talking about it, and I would go to therapy and realize the armor and the shield and everything that I was doing, and I thought that I was saving my family and friends from the pain, from enduring it with me. But in actuality, I was pushing them away. I wasn't including them on my journey when that's how they needed to heal too. They needed to be there for me, and they needed me to just let go. I don't think they ever saw me cry. I was going through this like I appreciate it. I love you guys, but I got this. And that really wasn't the way I should have gone about it, right? But then I started thinking, it took me a long time to recognize it. It took me a long time to accept it. Then it took me even longer to start talking about it. And the more I would talk about it, the more I was like, okay, I've got to get this story out. I've got to start talking and maybe helping other people. And therapy's getting really expensive. So if I do this, and I don't have to pay a therapist, if I get good enough at it, people will pay me to do it. And that's kind of my goal. But let's talk about kind of what I learned through that. And what I learned is that you need help. No matter who you are, no matter how strong, no matter how independent you are, you need help. You got to stop being stubborn. And part of that is being vulnerable. When you ask for help from somebody, I think a lot of people see that asking for help equates to a weakness. And a lot of people equate vulnerability to weakness. And those kind of go hand in hand. So when I started digging in more and more, that's whenever I was like, I'm gonna learn about this. I'm gonna understand myself. And it's been going through this journey of understanding it more and understanding myself has been so therapeutic in itself. And I know I'm not the only one going through this. And it doesn't have to be because of cancer. People will tell me that they're going through a rough time and they're like, oh, it's nothing compared to what you went through. And I'm like, well, don't do that, because it's not the same. You can't compare your trials and tribulations. You can't compare the amount of pain and hurt. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's tough, it's tough, no matter what you go through. So you can't sit there and downplay one thing because you feel like somebody else has the better trump card on you, right? And I thought that a lot of people will say you got to practice what you preach, and I am all for that. But I also believe when you preach it, you start to practice it, and it absorbs you. And I found that the more that I would talk to other people and talk about stuff like this, and the vulnerability and the failure and being open, and it started to really absorb into me. and to where my everyday started becoming more about that. And I felt a shift in myself. I felt that I was actually gaining momentum in my own self-healing, not just a physical healing, but a spiritual and emotional healing. And then I realized pre-cancer, I was just surviving. I wasn't thriving. I was just kind of going through the motions of life, going through of what was expected of me and what the next thing was to do. And I didn't want that. I needed to experience more. I wanted to have more depth to who I am and to what my life is. And they always say, think about when you are gone from this world, what are they in? It's not about what you said, it's about how you make people feel. And I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to leave something that, even though physically I can't have kids, hopefully one day I'm going to have a family and be able to adopt, but I want to leave something. I want to leave this world better than I found it. And I want to motivate other people to do that as well. So let's talk about failure. Failure is inevitable. We are surrounded by it daily, right? And if you got to think about all the failures that had to happen for us to be where we're at today, okay? Think about when you were learning how to walk. You had to fall 99 times before you stood up that 100th time. Excuse me. Thomas Edison failed at the light bulb 10,000 times before he got the successful one. Can you imagine what our world would be like if he had given up, if we did not have a light bulb? Think about that. Angry Birds, 3 guys back in 2003 spent 6 years developing 51 games to where they almost went broke and they almost gave up, and they took in one more leap of faith and made Angry Birds, which has now been downloaded. It's one of the most downloaded games ever, is it not? Right. They got to think it's never too late. Did you know that Harrison Ford was a carpenter up until the age of 30? Do you know that Vera Wang was 40 when she made her first dress? You know that at 23, Oprah was fired? Can you imagine being the person that fired Oprah? Except at 23, she wasn't Oprah. She wasn't there yet. She needed to go through those failures. She needed to be fired to become Oprah, right? So I'm sitting here thinking, okay, at 36, I still got the best years ahead of me. I'm going to do something. I'm going to do something great. So why are we so scared to fail? We fear the unknown, right? It can be very traumatizing. I'm going to tell you guys a story that I love to tell, and I know it's probably going to put me a little bit over, but I have to tell it because it involves Cassie. Talking about fearing the unknown, when we were kids, our parents would take us to Corpus, to the beach, every summer before school. And we were not the best swimmers. I mean, even now, we love to be in water, but we'll tell you, don't count on us to save you, because we can barely doggy paddle ourselves. But we would go to the beach, and we would play just deep enough where, it's safe, where the water goes to your knees. Well, one summer, my dad looks at us and says, and we'd been watching the banana boat go out, right? It looks like so much fun. He looks at us, you guys want to go? Like, heck yes, we do. And as kids, we were fearless. We didn't know what was out there. We had never been past our knees. But we're like, yeah, Dad, let's do it. So he takes us, and we get our life jackets on, and as we're about to get on the banana boat, this big dude, I'm talking big, heavy dude, walks up with his little kid and goes and takes the first and second spot on the banana boat. So it's his little kid, the big dude, and then us 3 little ninjas, that my dad calls us, follows in line, and my dad's at the very end. So the banana boat takes off. We're going. We're excited. The first turn that this guy makes, we all go flying into the water because of the big dude. So we go flying in, and we're all scattered. Well, me and our other sister, Rox, we kind of hang out, and we're cool. Like, we're just like, hey, we're having fun. We look over, and Cassie is like another 10 yards away from us, flailing.
It was 20 yards.
Oh, okay, 20 yards. flailing around, flat like you couldn't. I mean, she looked like a duck in distress. And then my dad is another 10 yards from her, and he sees her, and he goes into Baywatch mode, like swimming after her, and she's flailing around. And me and Rox, in the meantime, we're just kind of like, we're floating there, and we notice that we can touch the ground. It's not that deep. Dad, we're yelling, Dad, I'm coming. You know, he's being the hero. Grabs Cassie, pulling her. He's trying to swim to us. We're like, Dad, just stand up. And he stands up. The water comes to the lake, and he's just holding Cass. So Cass is traumatized by this, guys. Like, I will tell you, we would sing the Banana Boat song to her. Freak out. It wasn't until 20 years later she actually got on another banana boat and had the time of her life. But the moral of the story is, as kids, you're fearless, right? As kids, you're fearless in being in that water. We didn't know what was out there. Cassie didn't know that she could have possibly stood up. She just started freaking out because she didn't know. She got thrown off, she got tossed off. And we do that in life. We don't know what's out there. And sometimes we get into it and we go, and then we get tossed off for the first time, and we start flailing and saying, nope, this isn't for me, I'm gonna stay far away from it. But the second time she got on, 20 years later, she had the time of her life. Now, if I told her we were gonna go this weekend and get on a banana boat, she'd be like, heck yes we are, right? Right, Cass? Sometimes what's holding you back is all in your head. It really is. So the experiences that you have in your life, they lead you to steer clear of the bad, because remember, as a kid, you were born fearless. I remember going snow skiing the first time, and I'm in the school where I'm surrounded by kids, and I'm trying to learn how to ski as an adult. And there's little kids zooming by me, not even with ski poles. They're just flying because they're fearless, right? Jumping out of trees and eating mud pies, and that's the fearless part of it. And then you start, as you grow older, you start experiencing life, and you start steering clear of it because of the embarrassment, of the judgment, of the fear of being looked at as weak. Then we're also wired to be people pleasers, and you start kind of gearing into that of, oh, this makes somebody happy, but if I try to get outside this box, it doesn't make somebody so happy. So I'm just going to stay in this box where I know that I can make people happy. And you start comparing yourself, and you go through this whole gauntlet of emotions and stuff. I want to share this with you guys. I am a huge Brene Brown fan. Does anybody know her? So when you see this, you're probably going to hear a lot of, that's Brene, because I fall asleep listening to her sometimes. But she wrote a few books, but Daring Greatly is one of the first ones where she talks about the man in the arena, and that's a Teddy Roosevelt quote, and I'm going to read it to you guys, because it might be hard to. It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. I love that quote. I love it. I had heard it before, but what it means is, the way I take it, critics don't count. The value comes from those people that are fighting the good fight with you. So we're raised, or we grow up learning about people's judgment and criticism and tearing other people down. But quite honestly, from what I've learned, if you're not in the arena with me, then really your opinion doesn't count, because you're not fighting it. Because I'll guarantee you, that those people that are in the arena with you aren't going to criticize you. They're going to help you dust off and say, hey, let's get back up and do it again because I've been there. Let's do it again. Let's see what we've learned this time. Part of that is the vulnerability of it. Vulnerability is so hard to talk about sometimes. Let me ask you guys, fill in the blank for me, and you can just shout them out. Vulnerability is blank. Scary, right? Give me an experience. Vulnerability is having to fire somebody. Vulnerability is worrying about your kids when you're looking over them sleeping, having that moment where you're like, oh my gosh, I love them so much, but sometimes Vulnerability is having a hard conversation with your partner, trying to be intimate with your partner. Vulnerability is so many things. Do any of those sound like weaknesses? Right? Bless you. What about, let's fill this blank in. Vulnerability feels like anxiety. That feeling you get in the pit of your stomach, the lump in your throat when you're trying to say the words that are hard to spit out sometimes. Do any of those sound cowardly? They don't. Because vulnerability sounds like truth and it feels like courage, which is why it makes it so uncomfortable. No one wants to be that person, but yet society deems that those people are the bravest, right? You think about when you meet somebody, whether it's building a relationship, a work relationship, a romantic, a familial, the first thing you look for in that human relationship is vulnerability. You're looking for that person to be vulnerable with you. But it's the last thing that you want to give up, right? So when you try to have human connection and both people are trying to hold back that vulnerability, you're not getting anywhere at all. But why do we sell ourselves short of this? Are we scared to put what people think? We're scared of what they'll say, what they'll do. What is it? Sometimes it is that, but sometimes it's also that voice inside of your head that's keeping you from doing something because you're telling yourself, oh, they're gonna think I'm stupid. They're gonna make fun of me. I'm not gonna have anybody support me. If you think about 20 years ago, if you had said, I'm not gonna start this chamber because what if nobody shows up? What if nobody likes it? What if they talk about me behind my back and saying, well, that was a dumb idea? What if she had said that? We wouldn't be here today having these kind of conversations or having this networking and the connection that you're having with other successful women and business owners. Those are those kinds of things. So what do? We move forward bravely. You take the progress of those first steps because it takes that first step for anything to happen. And that first step is the most vulnerable step to take because part of vulnerability, the definition of it is having a risk of an emotional reaction that you have no control over. So being vulnerable is putting yourself out there and not knowing what's going to come, but being ready for it and knowing that I don't have the risk of failure. I will fail. And that's okay because when I fail, I'm going to grab that experience from that and take it with me to the next step, and I'm going to keep building and I'm going to keep growing from it to where I get where I need to be. You're going to get in the arena with the people that matter. You're going to make progress because progress without failure is insanity. Does anybody know the definition of insanity? Right. You can't make progress without failing because you've got to take that failure, absorb it, and move on to the next and take that experience with you. I love this one. The cost of not trying is 99% greater than the cost of failure. Every single time. Every single time. So if you're not in that arena, you guys are all in the arena together. You are all women. You're all business leaders. You are there for each other. You should be lifting each other up, staying away from the hurt because quite honestly, we've all fallen. We've all skinned our knees. We have bruised hearts to show it. No one ever goes it alone. Behind every successful person and every successful woman, there is a story of how she failed And a lot of times people like to skip over that. They don't want to talk about that because it's very taboo. But it's so important because it's what builds and teaches each other through human connection. When we see each other attempt at vulnerability, the more we encourage and the more we address those failures and how we can do it better and pick each other up, the more we start moving forward. So, as women together here in this group, and as the women that you network with outside of this group, it's so important that we empower each other, that we give ourselves the opportunities to be vulnerable with each other and accept the failures and help build each other through that. Because the people that you surround yourself with, that's the environment that you've created. And that's what's going to keep you going. So I'm going to wrap this up. Start your journey. You're going to step out of your comfort to grow, because courage over comfort. That's why vulnerability is so uncomfortable. It takes the courage to do it. But anything worth it requires the courageously being vulnerable. Relationships, motherhood, careers, businesses, everything. You need to be ready to fail to succeed. You need to trust your journey, that you're still young enough. You need to dust yourself off, get back up. I'm going to leave you guys with this. And I was trying earlier to get the sound to work, and I really hope it does. But when I'm having a tough day, I can't get the sound.
Put your mic up to this. Or it might be on the video itself.
So when I'm having a rough day, nope, it's not there. I listen to this song when I have failures, when I have potential for not being vulnerable, or a potential for risk or failure, anything. This is my go-to song, and I wish that it was playing. But it's called Rise Up by Andra Day, and it's a powerful song. When you leave here, I urge you to listen to it, because what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and you will rise up. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you guys.
Okay, we'll put that link up on our Facebook page to see if we can get that to work. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
I gotta apologize. Can you come back next month?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. There's some flyers here for tablescapes. And tell me your name again. Lindsay is going to come back next month and explain a little bit more about this. So I'm so sorry, we're running out of time with that. I want to get to our raffle drawing very quickly. Can you do it really quick?